Hi, and welcome to the Proxmox PowerShell video here. This is the 8th video in the series. I said the last one was probably going to be the last one, but this one will be the last one. And I actually have a little bit of a sneak peek of our next series, which is still going to have to do with PowerShell and Proxmox, but we're actually going to be creating a module in the next series for your Proxmox instance to be able to do a lot of the things that we've done in this video and the last two other videos where we've been interacting with the API. We're going to be creating commandlets for our Proxmox instance to be able to do those things a little bit easier and to be able to repeat them and to give them to your team to be able to manage your Proxmox server or Proxmox instance very easily through the API without having them to really know the ins and outs of the Proxmox API. They would just be able to use your PowerShell commandlets and do all of that stuff very easily. But before we go ahead and do that, I have one last API route that I do want to show because we've already seen how we can get the version information. We've seen how we can create VMs. But one of the things that we did through the GUI that I haven't shown yet is how to actually download the ISOs through the API. This way, you don't even have to do a whole lot through the GUI other than set up your API token once you're able to do this. So let's go ahead and let's see how we can download a ISO to our Proxmox instance. All right, so now that we have our Visual Studio Code, we're just going to go ahead and copy paste the code that we've been using for the last couple videos for our basic authentication, basically, which is just going to be this here. All right, so here we have our API token, which we are getting that from our CLI XML file. And then we are instantiating our Proxmox server, which is our IP address of our Proxmox. And then we are then going ahead and creating the headers, or in our case, we name it header. And then we put in our API token information. And then we have our base URI, which is going to be the base of all of our API calls. Now, this is something that we're going to be using a lot, especially when we're making our module, but it will be a lot less visible to the actual user that's using the commandlet. All right, so let's go ahead, and once we actually have all of this, all we actually need to know now is how do we download a ISO or anything into our Proxmox instance. So there is actually a very, very easy thing that we can actually use here, which let me just pull that up here. We're actually going to go look at the Proxmox API. And there's actually a handy thing in nodes, in node, storage, then storage. And then we have a download URL path here. So this will actually allow us to download the templates, ISO, OVAs, VM images by using a URL, and it tells us exactly what's required. Now, again, what's in the required section is going to be extremely important for when we're making that module that we're going to be making. And like I said, I have a little bit of a sneak peek for that for you guys at the end of this video. So once we actually gather what we actually need, we know what our URI is going to be because we know that it's going to be the API2 JSON nodes. We specify our node, storage, we specify our storage, and then download URL. All right, so let's go ahead and let's just go back to our code here. And let's first create our URI variable, which this for us right off the bat is just going to be the base URI slash, and then we know that it was nodes. And we know here that my node is just called Proxmox. Again, we had that little typo that we've seen. And if you are wondering how we can get this, you can get this multiple different ways. So in your Proxmox instance, we have our node right here, which is Proxmox, but we all have also seen this in one of the previous videos here. So if we actually just call the URI of just nodes, we can actually get all the nodes that are present. So if we actually run this here, and let me just actually authenticate here. And if we go ahead and we run this here, we will get the nodes back. Now, since I only have one node, we only get one node back, and our node name is Proxmox, Promox, which is perfect. And then we're going to put /storage. Now this is again where we kind of run into a situation where we would need to know what the storage name is. Now, of course, you can come here and we have two types of storage here. We have the local-lvm storage, and we also have the local storage. Now, as we can see, the local storage does have the ISO images, so we would assume that it's that. But you can also do that through the API route, just like what we did for the nodes here. If we actually just go ahead and nodes, and then go Promox, and then go storage, if we actually get that here, you're going to see that we get back the local LVM, which is content images root dir. And we can see that the storage local is going to be for our backup VZTMPL and ISO. What we're really focusing on here today is going to be the ISO. And you can actually already see that it's only got 13% of its space used. We can see the amount of available space in bytes here. So there are a lot of information that we can get. And again, these are all things that you would probably want to implement in a module. This way you can let people, or let your employees, let your team easily go get what nodes are available on your Proxmox server, what storages are available, what they're used for. All those things are extremely useful. But for us, we're just going to put that in here as local. And we know that the last part is going to be the download-URL. All right, and then the last thing we're going to need to do, as we've seen in our Proxmox API, we do have required parameters. So we do have content, file name, node, storage, and URL here. So let's go back into our Visual Studio Code. We're going to create ourselves a body object. So we're going to do a body variable equals @ open and close curly brackets. And all I like to do is I like to put content in there right away. File, name, node, storage, and URL. All right, and the content we're going to be putting in is going to be an ISO. The file name here, let's just go ahead. We already know what's on there. So we have our Ubuntu live server, we have our VirtIO drivers, and we have Windows Server 2025. I'm actually going to be downloading the Ubuntu desktop today. So let's just put the file name as Ubuntu desktop 2404. I think that's going to be the one that we're going to be downloading. If not, we're just going to change it right before we run it. The node we know is Promox here. We also know that the storage is going to be local. And now we need the URL of the download that we want. So if we actually just go ahead and open up a web browser here, let's just go to our favorite search engine. This could be anything that you really like to use, DuckDuckGo, Google, Bing, anything that you really want. And then I usually just type in Ubuntu download here. Of course, you can go to ubuntu.com and get it that way. We're just going to do the download Ubuntu desktop. And then we are going to get the 2404 2. We're just going to hit download here. And then all I want to do is right click on the download now, copy link. We can actually stop this download here. And what we can actually do is once we have that link, we can actually just go ahead and paste it inside of these double quotes here. And now we have our body, which is perfect. Now all we need to do is create a response variable, make that equal to the invoke-rest method. The URI is going to be our URI variable. Our headers is going to be our header variable. Our method is going to be post. Now again, we can find this out through our API documentation. We can see that it is a post there. And then our content type is going to be application/JSON. And then we're going to do our body. Now we've seen this before when we have a PowerShell object as our body. All I like to do is wrap the body in a variable wrapper and then pipe that to the convert to JSON with the depth of 100. Again, the depth of 100 is definitely overkill here. The depth is really only 1. But if you do have long, complicated bodies, I like to just do the depth of 100. It just kind of keeps that consistent, and you'll know you'll never hit any issues at that point. And then we're going to skip the certificate check. And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to put response.data at the end there just to see what it gives us back. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to run that entire code here. All right. And of course, now we get our storage here. So let's just go and make sure that everything is good. So that should be good. The URI, everything there seems good. And we are not downloading, so we do have an issue somewhere, which I probably have a fat finger somewhere here. Let's just make sure that our URI is set up properly, and that does look set up correctly. Oh, and the file name, we're just going to add a .iso in there. And there you go. That fixed it. So you do want to make sure that your file name, you might want to add, again, in our module, you might want to make sure that it has a .iso at the end. If not, just add the .iso. That is something that will be important. But now if we go back, we can actually see our download is actually currently happening. And you can actually look at the status of it. So it's at 30%. This is quite a large download. I think it is like just over 6 gigabytes in size. So it will take a few moments here to just download. But that is how you can actually fully download a ISO or image to your Proxmox instance through the API. So now you have the ability to connect to your Proxmox server through the API routes. You have the ability to download the ISO and then use that ISO to create a VM. So you really have the basic workings to be able to really manage, and you also have the ability to remove a VM. I forgot that we actually looked at that in the last video as well. So you really have the way to kind of manage very at a basic level your Proxmox server right now through the API routes. Of course, there are a bunch of other things that you can do with the API routes, like taking snapshots. You can clone images as well, or clone VMs. Now, I'm going to be going over a lot of those options with the module. Let's just take a look to see how far along we are in this download. So it is actually done here. So if we actually just go into backups and back into images, we can actually see our ISO is there. It's downloaded. It's just over 6 gigs. So that is fantastic. So now let's take a look at just this little module that I've been working on for you guys, that we're going to be starting that series on next week, just to give you guys a little bit of a preview of what's going on. And I actually already have all the commandlets made for what we actually did today. So this is usually what I work on my free time, is making this content for you guys and just preparing what we're actually going to be working on. So what I have here is I have a commandlet that lets us connect to our Proxmox server with the API token. We have the ability to get the nodes, we have the ability to get the storage, and we have the ability to go ahead and add a ISO to our Proxmox. And then as you can see, our code to actually do that becomes a lot simpler. So we just have commandlets that take in information that we get. So it's very, very easy. So as an example here, what we can actually do is let's download this Ubuntu once again here. And we have the content and we have the file name, and we have, let's just name it module test ISO here. And just to give you guys also a little bit of just a sneak peek. So if we go ahead and we look at this connection details here, we actually have the headers in here. We have our Proxmox server and we have our base URI. And we actually pass these connection details into all of our other commandlets, like this get Proxmox node. Here you can actually specify the Proxmox node that you want to get back, or you can decide to not specify it at all and you'll get all the Proxmox. Now, if you specify a Proxmox node name that is incorrect, you will actually get a message saying that none were found. So again, has a lot of that handling that will just help people that might not necessarily know what they're 100% doing if it was through the API. But if you give them a module, it becomes a lot easier. We can also get the storage. So we get all of our storages that are in the Proxmox. And once again, you can specify the storage name and only get that specific one. So here we can actually see our local. And then of course, we have our add content Proxmox, which again has all of that in there. And then even for the content, it actually only lets you put in these three little things. And you might wonder, like, why are you only giving those three as an option? And well, again, like I said, we can use the API documentation and you can actually see the format here. We only take these three things in. So you can do a lot of that error validation on your commandlets, and you can easily make a very, very good module. Now, I know that there's already modules that exist for Proxmox, but we're going to be creating our own because I think that that develops a lot of learning abilities with PowerShell and it gets you a little bit more comfortable, because if eventually you start using a piece of software or something that doesn't have a module that's already pre-created, at least you'll already be exposed to being able to make your own module that interacts with an API using the API documentation that's given to you. If you're always relying on the PowerShell modules that the community creates, it's not always the best. Now, of course, in your work life or even on your own time or anything like that, definitely if there's already a module exists, there's no point in reinventing the wheel, but we are here to learn. So I want to make sure that you guys take the most out of it as possible, because downloading a module and using that module, yes, you would be able to manage your Proxmox servers just fine through PowerShell, but we're losing a lot of that learning of making functions, making modules, interacting with the API, using the API documentation and reading that API documentation. There goes a lot for having those fundamental skills, especially in automation, programming, or really anything that you do, especially in IT or tech, that I think those little skills can definitely put you a step above everyone else. And again, this is a nice little thing that you can put in your GitHub or in your portfolio, that you've created your own Proxmox module. It's just something that's going to make you stand out. You didn't use the Proxmox module that's already made. You made your own with your own needs that you might have, because there are some things that maybe those Proxmox modules that the community created might not actually meet your needs. So this is something that just becomes more detailed for you and your environment. And I find making it yourself, you just get to learn the system a lot better than just using a community made one. If you guys would like to see any specific things in this module, please let me know in the comments section down below. Also, I was thinking about creating a series on Ansible, and this way, maybe the first VM you bring up on your Proxmox is a Ansible server, to where you can also manage your Proxmox through Ansible. Let me know what you guys think of that idea in the comment section down below, and if a lot of people like it, we will actually go ahead and do that as well. And also, if you haven't already, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and also don't forget to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.